Welcome, Allison. Welcome, LinkedIn.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of Leading in the Post-2020 Workplace, which is a series I started here on LinkedIn where I bring a fresh lens to key topics in what I call post-2020 leadership, right? What we need to do to lead today and tomorrow. So today, I'm very excited to have Allison Weiss. And if you play on my LinkedIn at all, you've seen her here before. If you work in commercial real estate, you don't need an introduction because she's a big deal. If you don't work in commercial real estate, Allison is an industry leader. She's the founder of a couple things.
Mhm.
One is CRE Recruiting, a recruitment firm for the industry. She's also the founder of an incredible company and project called Women Speak CRE, which aims to see and bring more women on stage at industry events. And our industry is not the only one that needs this. So if you need inspiration for how to do it in your industry, call it. Allison and I are also partners on a new project that has a similar mission, which is equipping more women in industries to get on stage, whether that
Mhm.
is speaking on podcasts or getting on stage and presenting, or whether it's just
Mhm.
being a better communicator within your organization or outside of it. We're working on that together. So I'm excited. All that to say, welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me. And this is a topic that you and I both personally and professionally nerd out on. So I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. And so, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about it, other than the fact that we nerd out on it, is that we don't think it's talked about enough. And we think it's an
Mhm.
issue that's reshaping and it's going to
Mhm.
pose really big challenges to the industry over the next, I would say, 5 to 15 years and beyond.
Yep.
But what we're noticing is no one's really talking enough about it and no one's doing anything about it. So, if we don't talk about
Mhm.
it, we don't do anything about it. So, today, we're going to talk about the retirement cliff. We're going to face it. We're going to give you the facts, and we're going to
Mhm.
talk about exactly what it means for the industry and what company leaders should be doing now to prepare. So, if you're wondering what the retirement cliff is, I'm just going to give you some stats to start it off. So, the key stat that Allison and I shout from every rooftop we can is that 40% of the commercial real estate industry of its workforce is due to retire in the next 10 to 15 years.
Mhm.
Okay. To break it down even further, 56% of current leadership is due to retire within the next 10 to
Mhm.
15 years. And to put that in context, when you look at the wider financial services industry, which also has some retirement cliff challenges, commercial real estate is still the oldest of all financial services sector industry.
Mhm.
So things like insurance, banking, commercial real estate has the biggest cliff. This is called the
Mhm.
retirement cliff. So essentially, a huge portion of the industry and industry leadership is due to retire in the next 10 to 15 years. And that's going to be a challenge for all of us. And
Mhm.
so that's what we're going to talk about today. And I want to kick it off with a question for you, Allison, which is I just laid out some of the key facts, which you know super well. But
Yes.
I want us to really hammer home what this means for the industry, right? The implications of these data points of this retirement cliff. So take it away. Tell us, what big picture does this mean for the industry to be facing such a large retirement cliff?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I think we're grappling with is the loss of institutional knowledge. And so, a lot of these folks that have been maybe within organizations for long periods of time or just have incredible tenure within our industry know a lot of things but haven't necessarily codified a lot of things for the younger generations coming up behind them. You might have experienced this in your career. I certainly did. That there were people that I worked with that were maybe a layer or two higher than me on the totem pole that were maybe not necessarily sharing information. They wanted to be the keeper of the information, and there were just things that were happening that were necessary to keep the business running, but they weren't documented processes. There weren't places that I could step in if that person had to be out, whether for a short-term or long-term leave. So I think there's a lot of information just floating out there in the ether that is not systemized, that is probably not as efficient as it could possibly be, that needs to be preserved and understood and really, I think, inculcated into the next generations that are going to take over. These are folks, much our generation and the generations hopefully coming up will have the benefit of us doing a little bit better. But training has been abhorrent in our industry. We're famous for throwing people into the deep end of the pool and seeing if they sink or swim, and basing whether or not they've been successful on their ability to get up to speed with little to no training information, especially leadership training. I know one of the things that has always been frustrating to me within commercial real estate is oftentimes those people who are promoted into these leadership roles and managing. I know you went from being an individual contributor into managing a massive team, and the investment made in your leadership training, you can talk about that. Zero,
Yeah.
zero. That information floating out there, the lack of real documentation of some of the key functions of business and processes and things like that. I think the vacuum of leadership training, I think these are all car accidents that we could get ourselves into, but we do have time we to act quickly. But those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about all the time within
Yeah.
organizations, as outside of just the succession planning, there's a whole bunch of other things that we need to do to get your organization ready for the future and ready for transformation, because
Mhm.
the processes and the ways that the folks that are holding the baton now have worked are not necessarily the ways, that are going to move us forward as an industry. So what got us here won't get us there, and we need to bridge that gap.
100%. And I want to talk about some of the really concrete and pretty financial risks of
Yes.
not doing anything about
Mm-hmm.
the retirement cliff and just carrying on as normal. And one of those I've talked to you a lot about, because it's one of your key specialty areas, is recruiting, right? Because I
Yes.
think about if we have almost 60% of leadership, current leadership across the industry, across companies retiring in the next 10 to 15 years, they're going to leave and we have to replace them, right? But
Mm-hmm.
statistically, we know demographically within the industry, we don't actually have enough mid to senior mid level
Mm-hmm.
folks who are prepared to step into those roles currently. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think what's going to happen is, okay, most leaders are going to look outside for external recruiting, which is a very common practice for senior level roles. But then I think if everybody is looking for the same thing at the same time, that becomes A, challenging, looking for a needle in a
Yes.
haystack, but B, very expensive
Mm-hmm.
because of the needle in the haystack challenge. And you're looking and competing for a very limited talent pool. Is that something, on the one hand, it could benefit recruiters, but I've also talked to a lot of HR professionals and recruiters in the industry who say, no, it's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would say our industry historically has not been super open or welcoming to folks with experiences outside of commercial real estate, despite the fact that we know that we're behind other industries like tech and consumer packaged goods and a whole bunch of other businesses. We've been unwilling to even be open minded, sometimes to folks that are coming from marketing backgrounds where real estate, commercial real estate is a subject matter that can be learned. Both you and I did not grow up hoping to be in commercial real estate. We tripped and fell our way into the business, and we learned and were able to matriculate very successfully. And so I think that there needs to be an open mind to the transferable skills that folks could come to the table with, whether they're attorneys who decided that they didn't want to practice, whether they're folks in other industries who have come via the HGTV or followed someone who's an influencer and got interested in commercial real estate that way. I think we really have to, unless we are able to capture a greater population of new to the industry and new to the working world folks than we ever have before, we don't right now have the influx of new talent to support the level of retirements that we have. And so that flexibility, which I haven't seen, unfortunately, from a lot of clients, it's not just that they want real estate experience, it's that they want site selection and acquisitions experience versus leasing experience. So there's a very defined, I feel like, profile that each company is going to the market for. And pretty soon those profiles are going to be less and less existent, where companies will have to pay a premium or they will have to take a chance on someone and also equip that person with the right training and coaching and resources. And just want to shout out for a second someone who is doing this work right now, which is Bethany Babcock. She is a phenomenal leader in commercial real estate, and this is her passion project. She actually, in 2020, when she saw folks not getting their internships and losing out on opportunities due to COVID, she actually opened her company's brokerage training program, which is all commercial real estate subject matter related. It's not sales training. And now today, the CRE launch program is across 5 different campuses. They are still looking for folks in Los Angeles and some of the other campuses. There are still spots if you're interested in this great training. And it's a tool to attract and retain folks in our industry, because that training is such a key and important piece. And the DIY learning of commercial real estate is fraught with challenge, struggle, takes a much longer time. And that's just some of what I'm thinking about these days.
100%. And Bethany's work, plus some other associations and foundations, are working on
Yes.
internships, on working on the what I
Yes.
call the front end, right? So
Yes.
the early career, how do we educate more young people about commercial real estate and the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to build up that pipeline? So that's good.
Yes.
But what I've noticed is that yes, we need to do that. There is no doubt. Also need to be looking in the middle, in the current middle,
Mm-hmm.
and also preparing that middle, what I call the sort of next gen leaders, to step
Yes.
up and be able to take these leadership positions. And what I've seen the industry doing over the past 5 to 10 years is realizing that, oh no, we do have a pipeline problem. We need to bring in more young folks
Yes.
into the industry, which is, we're doing it thanks to initiatives like Bethany's,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not really doing anything at the mid level to boost up that next level of leadership, which is
Yes.
the sort of sandbox that I play in because I'm really passionate about it. But
Yes.
someone in the comments basically summarized everything we want to say in one comment, which is great. So I'm just going to read it. So this person said knowledge management and succession planning, in addition to cross skilling and upskilling folks, are huge areas of improvement. 100%. So
Amen.
let's, amen, 100%. We can close alive now.
Yes.
But what I'm going to do is let's take that comment and break it down, because
Mm-hmm.
there are 3 important things there. First and
Mm-hmm.
foremost is this idea of succession planning. Now, it's
Mm-hmm.
this nebulous concept, but let's break down exactly what it means. It means being prepared and knowing what your plan is for backfilling these leadership roles. Now, one of the things, I think the first step is even knowing what
Mm-hmm.
your retirement cliff is within your company. And I was just
Yes.
speaking to an HR executive the other day about how they don't even know what percentage of their leadership is likely to retire in the next 10 to
Yeah.
15 years. So going back to your comment about internal data and just
Mm-hmm.
understanding, okay, what's the lay of the land right now? I think that's an important first step, is saying, okay, let's look at our company, let's look at our
Mm-hmm.
trajectory, let's look at our leadership, and where are we going to have some succession planning that we need to think about over the next 5 years. What advice do you give to organizations around that kind of succession planning? Because that's really something that you play in a lot.
Yes. So I have a documented process for leading companies through succession planning within their organization. I have some of it right here in a talk that I have given to a few different organizations: people, process, and platform. The people is recruiting, retention, and succession. And I think we'll talk about retention in a little bit as well. But on the succession front, we really need to be identifying early on the high potential folks within our organization and developing career paths and roadmaps throughout. One of the best ways to retain folks in your organization is to not just give them opportunities to move up, but also to move laterally within your organization between different business units. And again, back to the importance of institutional knowledge. The folks who have been trained in underwriting or asset management make great portfolio managers or great folks on the acquisition side, because they understand the impact of onboarding a bad asset into your portfolio. So I think thinking a little bit differently about these hard and fast career paths and verticals that we have, and those silos that exist so much, especially within larger organizations. So, one, rooting out the silos; two, asking questions about people's goals and what
Yeah.
they would prefer to be doing, giving them opportunities to work on alternative projects and to moonlight with other teams in your organization. All of those things make folks sticky from a retention perspective. And so when I pick up the phone and call them, they're less likely to be interested in a conversation with me because y'all are meeting their needs and also addressing their interests and their growth. And those things are very important to employees, especially Gen Z, millennials, and all of that.
Yeah.
But that identifying who those key people are and making sure that they're having ongoing conversations about their achievement, their performance, giving them access to special courses, tools, opportunities, conferences. All of these things, I think, really show them that you see them as a future leader of your organization, and that should be the conversation
Yeah.
we can follow. And it's all about just connecting, having caring conversations about people's performance. And also too, when things start to go awry, Gallup did an amazing study of folks who had left an organization proactively. So those who hadn't retired or been laid off or quit or what have you on their own, so those people who are choosing to go, of those people, a very high percentage of them, I want to say it was probably more than 50% of them, and I'll get the stat and we'll put it in the comments here, hadn't had a meaningful conversation with their manager about their performance within the last 90 days before they left the company. And
Yeah.
so we know that's quarterly. That's the bare minimum that we should be doing with the people that we want to retain within our organization.
Yes, amen again. And there's a lot of amens in the chat, so this is great. And retention, as you're talking about, is not just a nice to have or being a nice manager or being nice to your people. It's not just about that. It's also about what we said at the beginning. Like, we as an industry and all the companies within it cannot afford to be losing that
Yes.
segment of the industry, which is
Mm-hmm.
the segment that I represented when I worked in it, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of millennials, the
Mm-hmm.
next generation of leaders. And what I've seen since the pandemic, and I'm part of that wave, is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that tier leaving, a lot of
Yes.
talent leaving,
Yes.
either leaving the industry entirely or they're
Mm-hmm.
leaving companies and starting their own thing,
Yes.
which is great in some cases, right? That's great. But
Yes.
it's a real threat for a lot of the existing companies in the industry because you're losing talent and you're creating
Mm-hmm.
competition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so we need to be investing in retention, especially that tier, for all the
Yes.
points you mentioned. Now, one other thing, and I want to highlight this that you said, is this idea of, I think there are a lot of restless millennials. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. There are a lot of restless millennials because I talk to them all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and they're advancing, they're really hardworking, they're really eager to climb up the ladder, but they're looking up and they're saying, I'm not seeing any openings that are going to
Mm-hmm.
come about in the next 10 to 15 years. Is this really where I want to be?
Yeah.
There's this myth that when you're facing that kind of restless, high talent, high potential employee, that you have to throw money at them or you have to give them some title change. And that's actually not true. Of course, that's ideal.
That's
But there's a
nice.
lot of it's very nice. We love that. But there's a lot of data that supports and demonstrates that what that tier really wants is
Mm-hmm.
development and growth. And growth can mean a salary increase, it can mean a title change, but it can also mean
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you said,
Mm-hmm.
giving folks at that tier an opportunity to experience different parts of the business,
Mm-hmm.
learn new projects, learn new areas of commercial real estate, like we
Mm-hmm.
said. But it also means investing in their growth and leadership development. That is proven to have a big impact on retention. When people feel that their leaders, their managers, and their company are investing in their growth and their
Yes.
development, that is a really effective way to keep someone engaged, even if you can't give them the salary raise. And let's be honest, investing in a 1 year or 6 month leadership development program is significantly cheaper than
Yes.
A, giving them a massive raise, or B, having to replace them,
Replace them.
recruit a new person, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
from an investment and a money standpoint, it is the ROI of investing in learning and development for your people is huge, huge. And so that's where I want to turn now, because if number one is we're talking about action steps, what companies should be doing. If number one
Yeah.
is around the succession planning, be
Mm-hmm.
aware, okay, who are we likely to lose in the next 10 to 15
Mm-hmm.
years? Who is our high potential talent, or who are the folks within the company that we want to support and grow? And then number two is, all right, who's going to backfill these
Mm-hmm.
leadership positions? Who's the next gen of leadership? We mentioned two things here. One is you mentioned thinking outside the box when it comes to recruiting. All right, outside the box in terms of the industry, outside the box in terms of, okay, if I need a leasing agent, does the person filling in need to have had 10 years of leasing agent specific experience,
Yeah.
or could you get someone who's been in a really great sales role, or who's been
Mhm.
leasing in a different sector, or who has all the competencies you need, but maybe
Mhm.
in 3 to 6 months will be one of the best leasing agents you'll ever have. And so thinking outside of the box, I think, is number one. And do you have any thoughts on that, or have you seen folks in the industry doing that well?
I think
Oh,
I froze.
I think you froze, but you're back. Did you hear my question, or should I repeat
I
it?
didn't hear the last part of your question. I'd love to hear it.
So the question I had for you is, have you seen leaders or companies in the industry doing a good job of thinking outside the box when it comes to recruiting? And if so,
Mm.
what do they do, or what do you advise they do?
Yeah. So I have one client who I can hold up as an incredible example of this. So they're a fund control company, and a fund control company is an intermediary between a capital source that finances commercial real estate development and an actual developer. And so think of them as like the checks and balances. They're doing the construction accounting, the draw requests, they're doing construction inspections, and work very closely with the capital source to provide a white glove experience all the way through the construction process. Because as you may or may not know, if I get a $10 million loan for construction, they don't just hand me a check for $10 million. They want to see that I'm actually building the building, and then it's all up to code and all that good stuff. They're aware that they're in a very small sandbox. There aren't that many competitors. And so they naturally have had to think outside of the box for the folks that they've hired for the team. And they really hire more based on drive, on work ethic, on, I would say, personality traits that they have known to be highly successful within their organization in the past. And so they're hiring folks primarily without commercial real estate experience. Some of them have gone through maybe a project management certificate program. There are a few roles that I've hired that do require commercial real estate experience, but they are spending more time getting to know that individual and knowing that they can teach them the business of fund control. And I would argue that fund control or leasing or acquisitions, I think in commercial real estate, because we have our own language, because we have such a unique way of speaking about our business and very highly specialized, let's call them sales process or sales processes, that we think it's going to take too long to learn or teach. And I know that there's also the red flag that goes up sometimes that I don't want to teach these people. I want them to come to me with this experience so they can hit the ground running, because otherwise I'm just training someone who's eventually going to go to my competitor. In the 3 years, I think that I've been working with them, I've helped them to double the size of their company, and no one has left because there has been consistent promotion. They've checked in and said, Allison, we want to make sure that we are at least meeting the market or exceeding the market as it comes to cost of living increases and raises. Can you give me information there? They're an ideal client because they are focused more on the individual. They're willing to teach, they're willing to coach, and they see the potential of folks. And they also, I think, have very high expectations as well. They run fast, they do a lot of work. And so I think that's one example, but it is the outlier, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't the outlier, but I think this is possible for the future. And I think the more we can get great education in front of people, especially that missing middle kind of leadership quartile that
Yeah.
hasn't had the formalized training and hasn't yet been able to step in and take the reins, if those folks can't move vertically within your organization because you have folks in spots that are ambivalent about leaving the company, or might say, oh, in the next 3 to 5 years, and lo and behold, you get 3 to 5 years down the road and they kick the can a little bit further,
Mhm.
you do have the danger of losing those folks if you aren't equipping them with knowledge, tools, resources,
Yeah.
leadership training, all of that good stuff.
So let's talk about that, because this is great. I'm interested in learning new series skills after 25 years in property management operations. It's so important, because let's talk about that aspect of leadership development, because the other thing, as we're looking towards this retirement cliff, this
Mhm.
looming, very urgent retirement cliff. So A, there's the opportunity to look outside of the industry, think
Mhm.
outside the box. The other thing that we really need to be doing is looking internally at our
Yes.
organizations and saying, how are we cultivating the talent that we have and preparing
Yes.
them for leadership? Now, one thing I want to say before we get into that is something, a mistake That happens a lot. Current leaders will go, we just don't have anyone who's leadership ready here. Or we don't have anyone who's leadership potential. Wrong, false, not true.
Yes.
Because leadership is not something you're born with. And so a lot of times we look at folks and we go, oh, that's a natural leader. That person's going to rise to the top. And sometimes that happens. But great leadership skills are actually 70% learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're looking internally and you're looking down your hierarchy, down your ladder, and you're saying, I don't really see the potential here, we've got to start thinking outside the box of who we can recruit, you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And that opportunity is upskilling and leadership development, which is, again, financially a really affordable and high ROI thing to invest in, to build out your own leadership pipeline, because it saves you the recruitment costs in the future.
Yes.
It
Yes.
saves you leadership disasters. And what happens is, I read this stat the other day that something like 68% of people who step into management positions, people manager positions for the first time, have had no management training, which lines up with other data that says that most of us have currently or have had at some point a really toxic boss.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll leave that there. I have a whole article on that. Let me know if you want to read it. It's on LinkedIn, on toxic bosses and all the data. It's wild. But I want to go back to this idea of leadership development, because that is an investment that I think companies need to be making right now. And it's an investment for companies that is not just something big companies can or should do, right?
Yeah.
In our industry, the big players, CBRE, JLL, Cushman, right? They have traditionally these learning and development branches, and how can you compete with that, and et cetera. This is why leadership development is so great, because it's something that actually small and medium-sized firms can invest in. Doesn't need to be in-house, but
Mm-hmm.
you can invest in. It doesn't break the bank, and it produces the same, if not better, goals as the internal groups within these larger companies. And
Yeah.
so I want to talk a little bit about that and the importance of leadership development, which is what I work on, right? Because from my experience in the industry, as you mentioned, went from running a team of 1 to a team of over 500 with zero management and leadership training. And what happens when that happens is you waste a lot of time learning the ropes, you waste a lot of time getting it wrong, you waste
Yeah.
a lot of time with low confidence, right? Because you're not really
Mm-hmm.
sure what you're doing half the time. And if you talk
Mm-hmm.
to anyone in the industry, I don't care what level of seniority they are, you ask them and they will tell you, if they're being honest, that a lot of the time they have no idea what they're doing. And that's especially the case since the pandemic, when nobody had any idea how to run a hybrid team. Nobody had any idea how to lead through a pandemic. And so we need to start being open that these are skills that we don't have and that we need to learn. The other thing I want to mention, and then I'll get off my soapbox, I think it's so important, is that we as an industry, as you mentioned, Allison, have relied entirely too much on this sort of learning on the job, learning from the current leaders and just shadowing, absorbing, and copy pasting. That's not going to work in a
Yeah.
post 2020 context,
Yeah.
because leadership that steps into leadership really starting now
Mm-hmm.
has to have a really different skill set.
Yes.
Okay. You need to
Yes.
know how to lead more diverse teams, because
Mm-hmm.
demographically the country is diversifying rapidly. You need
Mm-hmm.
to know how to manage and lead AI and
Mm-hmm.
tech innovation. So if you're
Yep.
relying on current leadership to teach you how to manage AI and innovation, I'm just
Yeah.
going to leave some silence there. You're going to have some problems, right?
Yeah.
So we need to think about proactive leadership development, and we need
Mm-hmm.
to think about leadership development, again, outside the box, not the traditional basics of communication, unconscious bias, which are important. We need to really be thinking about what are the specific leadership skills we need to equip that next gen with in order to step in and lead the industry forward. So I think you agree.
I do agree. And Iris came to agree as well, agrees. So I'm so glad that you said that leadership looks different. If you base what leadership today looks like and tried to forecast that into the future, it is almost totally irrelevant. And as we know, in a male dominated industry, this changeover has huge implications for women in commercial real estate as well. And I think one of the things that we didn't talk about in terms of folks leaving the workforce or leaving commercial real estate is this life situation that women go through when they have kids and how that relates to the workplace and being the primary caregivers in a lot of households and all of that. So I think new ways to innovate in retaining women through that stage of life and making sure that we are promoting as many women as we are men, and specifically white men within our industry. These are all things that we need to look at as an organization. So I would say, in addition to thinking about the fact that leadership looks different, is that there's no better time than now to really take this to heart and start working. And I look around at all of my friends on LinkedIn and all these different social media platforms and that I'm bumping into at conferences. We're investing in our growth, right? A lot of us are doing this stuff individually. Maybe companies are not necessarily supporting, or you're an entrepreneur. You're doing this because you know this is what you need to do to have an edge and to position yourself as a thought leader in the industry, whether you are doing LinkedIn Lives like we're doing today, or whether you're creating content, YouTube videos, whatever the case might be. I do think that there are more opportunities for women to step into the throne of leadership and to really take the lead and to make this industry a better place for all of us. And I think it's all about initiating conversations. Unfortunately, if you're in an organization, whether it's a small organization or a large organization, I have found from my experience in both types of environments that I need to be the advocate for myself. No one is coming to quote unquote save me or to help me maybe elevate into the next stage of my career. But as much as possible, if we can ask our managers and say, you know, hey, so and so, we're already 5 months into 2025. I wanted to chat with you about how I'm tracking to the annual goals that I set earlier in this year. There are some other opportunities that I have for professional growth and development that I'd love your insight and approval on, and really pushing those conversations forward and asking within your organization if you have town hall meetings, if you have opportunities, even just the casual coffee chat or water cooler chat, to ask what's the succession plan with our current executive team? Where do you see, Mrs. CFO, where do you see opportunities for vertical and lateral growth within our organization over the next few years? Our industry, our organizations are ripe with opportunity. And I think we have to be proactive. We need to elevate ourselves with our own skills. If the companies will support us, great. If not, it's something that we should do anyway. It makes us more valuable. It makes us more successful. It makes us happier and more fulfilled at work when we have these skills and tools in our toolkit. But that's my little soapbox. I will let you
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah, and I think it's a perfect soapbox because the point you're making is that this is not just a challenge and a risk for the industry, it's also a huge opportunity for us to
Yes.
reshape the leadership of the industry, make it more representative of the end users of real
Yes.
estate, all the
Yes.
sectors, which has been a
Yes.
challenge and is going to continue to be a challenge for the industry because we do not represent the people that we are trying to sell to, and
Yes.
that is going to keep us behind. So
Mm-hmm.
it's an opportunity as much as it is a challenge. Now, I just want to highlight some of the concrete action items that you said. So, if you're a senior leader in the industry right now listening to this, what I want you to do, what we want you to do is A, have a good look internally and make sure that you know what your retirement cliff looks like internally. Map that out. What are the
Mm-hmm.
risks? What are the areas that you're going to need to start thinking about in terms of backfilling those roles? If you are not a senior executive leader right now, but you want to be, do what Allison just said, which is ask for leadership development and growth. And if you need help asking for that, you come straight to me or you go straight to Allison because we have all of the data, all of the talking points.
Mm-hmm.
I built a 10-month leadership development program that's all virtual, specifically for commercial real estate called P20 Leadership. If you want to check that out, look at the curriculum on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the curriculum and look at how we've carefully crafted out what are the skill sets you need to be a leader. And within that is another thing that Allison and I are working on, which is around public speaking
Mhm,
and presence and leadership in terms of your voice. So
mhm,
I want to just highlight a couple of the projects that we have out there for those of you who are in that, what I call magic middle, who are
yeah,
looking for guidance and opportunities to grow up in professionally and in those skill sets. So check out p20leadership.com/CRE. I'll put the link on there, and you would get to work with us in that, but it's
mhm,
something that I am really encouraging folks to get their companies to sponsor them in, and I'm
mhm,
encouraging companies to send their high potential talent to. That is how we shape the industry. That is
yes,
how we create the leadership pipeline that we need to move
mhm,
forward. The other thing I want to highlight is something that Allison and I are working on, which is all about, I'm going to put this up on here, which is all about public speaking. Allison, do
mhm.
you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing there to help shape the voice of the next level of
Sure.
leadership?
So, one of the things that we realized collectively, Melina and I, when Women Speak CRE first became a conversation, is that there were many women who thought, oh, great, I'm already speaking. I'd love to get better at speaking. I don't really have a venue to do that. And we have such a unique vernacular, again, in commercial real estate and such unique audiences and roles and companies and all of that, that we thought it made sense to have a commercial real estate specific cohort. Hospitality might come into that as well, because hospitality, commercial real estate, kind of similarities there. And so Melina and I are developing this, and public speaking is also a portion of her P20 leadership training because it is such an important skill. It's something that Melina and I are mostly self taught, but have a little organizational training on as well. And really, everything behind what we do is data driven. We want to give you guys insights, actionable tools, resources, things that you can use, not just to own the stage, but also to promote yourself in the process of being selected as a speaker, looking for new opportunities, how to navigate that entire process. And so it's going to be really great. We are probably going to launch, I would say, around June. We've got a working session coming up at ICSC, which I'm really excited about. But definitely sign up for the wait list. When you sign up for the wait list, you get access to an incredible library of resources that was put together about public speaking. So it's videos, TED Talks, a variety of different tools that you can start consuming, using, and learning from before we get started. And if you have any questions about what we're up to, or you're thinking about a larger group within your organization, feel free to reach out to Melina and I, as we are putting together actively lists and cohorts and things like that. So we can also keep it small enough where we can have good quality one-to-one feedback sessions with everybody in the group.
Yeah, we are super excited. Allison and I, and maybe she's going to get mad at me for saying this. We will both be in Vegas next week
Oh,
for
yes,
ICSC Recon. So if anybody is looking to have a chat about any of this, questions, even if it's just
please.
about their own personal development journey, whether you're a woman or not a woman in the industry, we're just really passionate about supporting that next generation of leaders, both of us. So I
Mhm.
flashed up the link to sign up for the waiting list for the speaker program, but you can also just message either of us here on LinkedIn to find out more. And we've got a ton of other assets that we have both built around the retirement cliff, plus
Yeah.
the asset that Allison mentioned about people, process, and what was the third one?
Platforms, yes. If
Platform.
you want to have a conversation about succession planning within your organization, I would
Yeah.
love to help you. And I've got some tools and templates, and we can walk you through that process.
Yes. And so we're going to pull that all together. And so if you want more information on any of this, specifically around the retirement cliff in CRE, I set up a little button on my website, p20leadership.com/CRE. You'll see a button towards the top that says facing the retirement cliff, click here for more. Just submit your email address, and we'll send over the materials and updates as we gather them, because this is a
Mhm.
conversation we're going to continue to have, and we're going to
Yes.
continue to provide guidance around, because we both believe it's really important to the industry, and we're really passionate about helping the next generation of leaders really rise up
Mhm.
and take over these leadership roles in really new and innovative ways. So if that's something that resonates with you, let us know, and we're here to help you do it. So thank you so much to everyone who was here live with us or who is watching the
Yes.
replay. And Allison and I are both such open books. reach
Yes.
out to us, get in touch. We love hearing that something resonated with you, or if you have questions, let us know. And we're so excited to work with you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.